Hi everyone, David Aragona here for the April 10th edition of Horses to Watch, where we take a look back at some races from the last week, looking for horses that encountered adversity, were prevented from achieving their optimal result due to poor trips or trouble during their races. And we're going to take a look on this episode at four races in total. Three from opening week at Keeneland. Keeneland did begin their spring meet last Friday, and we'll take a look actually from two races on that Friday card and one from the Bluegrass Day Saturday. And then we'll close things out with one replay from Aqueduct, where I typically do like to focus during the wintertime. They ran their Wood Memorial Day card on Saturday, and we'll take a look at one race from that undercard. But let's begin with the action in Lexington, Kentucky, and we'll talk about one of the feature races from that opening day card on Friday, April 5th at Keeneland. It is race 8, the Grade 3 Transylvania. This one for 3-year-olds going the 1 mile distance on the turf course. Let's break these runners from the gate, and we're going to focus on the far outside post position of the number 12 Kajino, and there he is highlighted breaking from that difficult post. And that post is going to cause some problems for him during the race because it's tough to not be able to save any ground over this Keeneland turf course, and this horse is going to really get into that kind of trouble here. Ground loss is the big issue for Kajino at every stage of this Transylvania. You'll notice they go into the clubhouse turn here. Javier Castellano tried to ride him away from the gate to get some forward position, but he was unable to make the lead. This horse not really a front-running type. He wants to track in mid-pack, and he just wound up 4 to 5 wide, getting spun out even wider as they bended into that clubhouse turn. Just not the kind of trip that you want to have for a horse like this on the turf, especially given the way the turf racing typically plays. With horses that come from off the pace, you generally want to find some cover at some point in the race to not have these horses seeing daylight for the entire race, saving some energy for them to produce that kick through the stretch. Kajino never able to do that during this trip, and you could see here as they pass the half-mile pole, Javier getting a little bit aggressive with him to try to get forward going into that far turn, just trying to at least get into the 2 or 3 path by the time they move around to that second bend, so he's not going 5 wide again. But in doing so, he's having to expend a little more energy than he probably would want to do on a horse that has done some of his best running in the stretch of his races. And now by this point, as they come to the quarter pole, he's made this early move. He has to go on from this point. You can't take back from here. So he tries to open up on this field and upper stretch. And for a brief period of time, it looks like it might still work out, even after that difficult trip, losing as much ground as he did. But the number 4 Neat, who was saving all that ground in behind him, a horse who basically just rode the rail for every step of this trip until coming around one rival in the final furlong here, is going to nail Kajino in a real heartbreaking nose decision right at the finish there. But there is no doubt that between these two horses that hit the wire together, Kajino ran the best race. This is a horse that has shown ability right from the start of his career. He won his debut impressively at Aqueduct last year, routing on the turf with an impressive late finish. He has then lost 3 races in a row, finishing second in all of them. Actually was beaten by the same rival, Abramar, twice at Gulfstream Park over the winter, but he's run well at all of those starts. And as you can see in the replay we just took a look at, there's a strong argument that Kajino should have won this race, so he's really not that far away from being undefeated. This is a talented 3-year-old turf horse, and I think we could see him show up next time in the American Turf on the Derby Day undercard, and I think he's a horse that you would have to take very seriously in that spot based on the trip he had in this Transylvania. Let's stick on the turf at Keeneland and talk about another race from that Friday, April 5th card. This is actually 2 races later, the final race of the day, race 10. It's a maiden special weight for 3-year-old fillies going a little bit longer, 1 mile and 3/16 on the turf. And we'll break these runners from the gate, focusing on the number 3 Guinevere. She's the horse with the big white face, the chestnut. And you could see her right here from that inside post position, gets a little shut off, has to get again steadied back between horses here, and just ends up getting shuffled all the way to the back of the pack. Not a big surprise for a horse like this. She's got so much size to her that when she gets stopped a little bit, it's hard to regain the momentum, and her rider, Abel Cedillo, is just content to let her float to the back of the pack here, and nothing goes badly awry for the beginning of this race. It was a race that was more dominated towards the front end. We didn't see too many horses making up ground from as far back as Guinevere was, even though the pace does appear honest as far as the raw fractions go. But things are going to start to go awry once the field heads onto the backstretch. And just to give some some background on Guinevere, this was the second start of her career. She had made her debut at Turfway Park on the synthetic course and had run on decently to be third, debuting in a two-turn race. So Wesley Ward, her trainer, obviously has pegged this as a horse that wants to go these longer distances, stretching out to 1 3/16 miles in the second start of her career. But you're going to see what happens right here. Abel Cedillo starts to get after her a little bit to move up, but he does so past the half-mile pole while going about 3 to 4 wide. And he's asking this filly to try to make up ground outside of horses for about a half mile from home as they head into that far turn. And it's really difficult at a course like Keeneland, where the turns are so tight on the turf, to try to make this sweeping move without cover, going around every horse when you're out in the clear from the entire turn, from the half mile pole all the way to the quarter pole. And that's the case with Guinevere. You could see she's just spinning widest of all into the stretch, and she gets spun even wider by a horse that's drifting out in front of her. She's not going to do much running in the stretch here. You can see she's hanging on her left a little bit, just is tired from exerting that energy, trying to make that move, covering more ground than the rest, coming around that far turn. And she's going to finish pretty far back in this race. I just don't think it was the right trip, given the trouble at the start and the fact that she had no cover trying to make that wide move around the far turn. She's better than the result of this race would indicate. She ran better on debut over the synthetic course at Turfway Park. Now, she's by Justify. There is plenty of European turf pedigree on the downside for Guinevere, but just based on the way that she runs, she doesn't look overly turfy to me. She's so big and heavy and has that Justify-like frame to her. I wonder if she's a horse that might ultimately want to go longer on the dirt. She seems like a one-pace type. Wesley Ward can sometimes tinker around with the types of distances and surfaces that his horses compete over. So she's one that I think has more ability than this result would indicate, and I would be interested to see her maybe try something a little bit different in a future start. Let's stick with Keeneland, but move on to their Saturday card. And we're actually going to talk about the main event from Saturday. It is race 10 on April 6th, the Grade 1 Bluegrass for the 3-year-olds, going 1.1 miles on the dirt. Let's break these runners from the gate, and I want to talk about a couple of things in here. We're focusing on the number 1, Top Conor, who is the pace setter in this Bluegrass. He is the stablemate of the eventual winner, Sierra Leone, who we're not going to focus on, but you'll notice he does make a very impressive late run from far back to get up to win this race, and he'll occupy a lot of the conversation going into the Kentucky Derby based off this effort. But I do want to discuss his stablemate Top Conor, who sets what was a very fast pace in this Bluegrass. And I think the performance of Top Conor has been unfairly dismissed by a lot of people that watched Keeneland during this opening weekend, because there's this narrative out there that Keeneland was this speed highway, that Sierra Leone, who won this race, was the only horse to overcome, and Sierra Leone was so much more impressive winning this Bluegrass due to overcoming this strong speed bias at Keeneland. I like to look at these things objectively from my own perspective and not take other people's word for it. And looking through the charts, watching the replays of these dirt races at Keeneland from opening week, I don't see this speed bias that people are talking about. Sure, the sprint races around one turn did have quite a few front runners winning, but they were mostly logical horses. A number of those races featured blue color-coded pace figures in Timeform US, or in other words, slow paces that would naturally benefit front runners in dirt races. And if you just isolate the two-turn races, the dirt routes, there were 5 of them on opening week, and 3 of them were run from off the pace. Looking at the front runners in those races, none of them ran above where their odds were supposed to place them. Very few of them, I should say. They were not races where front runners had significant advantages, or really advantages at all. So getting back to Top Conor, who is that gray horse, who's coming into the stretch here and is going to fade a little bit after leading this field through the opening 7 furlongs off this race before the entire group gets overhauled by Sierra Leone in the late stages. I want to give Top Conor some extra credit for setting this fast pace. And just looking at some of the fractions and the Timeform US pace figures for this Bluegrass, it was very fast. There's no denying that. This race got a final time figure of a 1:17 from Timeform US, which equates pretty well, about 20 points above the buyer speed figure of 98, which is exactly what you would expect. But in relation to that 1:17 final time number, Top Conor ran his first 2 calls of the race, so at the quarter and the half mile pole, with 1:52 Timeform US pace figures. That is extremely fast for a 2-turn dirt route going 9 furlongs. And predictably, he paid the price for going that fast. He faded through the final quarter mile, but you've got to give this horse credit for sticking around as long as he did, leading that field for the first 7 to 7.5 furlongs of that race. And it was also asking a lot of Top Conor to tackle a Grade 1 Derby prep after just making making one prior start in his career, winning his debut at Gulfstream Park. He showed the ability to come from just off the pace that day, and I won't be surprised if the connections go back to stalking tactics in his next start, wherever that may be. Maybe they'll try a race like the Pat Day Mile, cutting him back to one turn on Derby Day. That seems like an appropriate spot for a horse that did win, going the one-turn mile on debut. I just think this horse has a lot of ability, and I'm not going to hold the bare result against him since he did lose this Bluegrass by 8 lengths, but I think his overall performance was a lot better than that, and his time formula speed figure, which is upgraded all the way up to a 117 with a big pace upgrade that I think is justified, actually matches that of the winner Sierra Leone. So the time formula speed figure is definitely going to flatter this horse when he comes back for his next start. Well, let's take a look at another race that has a similar situation, moving over to Aqueduct to discuss one from that Wood Memorial undercard on Saturday. Race 9 at Aqueduct was the Bayshore for 3-year-olds going 7 furlongs. Let's break these runners from the gate, and we're going to focus on the horse that I think ran the best race of anybody in this Bayshore, and that is runner-up number 4, Maximus Meridius, who was one of the favorites in this race, and I think he really delivered on that public support, just was unable to achieve the winning results due to the way this race unfolded. This is one where all of the horses that were contesting the pace really backed up to finish nowhere except for Maximus Meridius. You could see there are about 5 or 6 horses that are within 4 lengths of the early leader through the beginning of this race, and they're all going to fade away one by one as this race is dominated by horses coming from off the pace. Actually, the horses that finished first and third in this race in the trifecta with Maximus Meridius are the number 6, Reasoned Analysis, who you can see is currently second to last, and the number 8, Eliminate, who is currently off the screen. He's last at this stage and is going to make a big late run to get up for third. And you can see back towards the front end, Maximus Meridius now, before they even get to the quarter pole, he's putting away the other speeds that were contesting that fast pace with him, and he's going to open up past the quarter pole coming to the 8th pole. What seems like it might be an insurmountable margin, but that those early fractions, they are going to take their toll on this horse, as the number 6 Reasoned Analysis had built up a lot of momentum at this point, and he is going to mow down this front runner as they come onto the finish line. But similar case to Top Conor that we just talked about. If you're looking at the Time Form US pace-based speed figures, Maximus Meridius is going to come out of this race with the highest speed figure of anybody. He got a 111, a big pace upgrade from the final time speed figure for this race. And just looking at the raw pace figures, his performance got a final time number of 99. That was upgraded all the way up to that 111 Time Form US speed figure. And that's because he ran the first call of this race, the first quarter mile, with a 151 Time Form US pace figure. That's not quite as high as the 152 that Top Conor ran, but there's more variance in paces in dirt routes than there are in dirt sprints. So you could actually view that 151 as an even faster early fraction than what Top Conor ran in a 2-turn race going 9 furlongs. So Maximus Meridius ran a big race in this Bayshore. I think he's the best horse coming out of this race, and we'll see if his connections can get him to step up against tougher company down the line in races like the Woody Stephens or the H. Allen Jerkins, which will be competed at the grade 1 level on big days in New York later in the year. He might have that kind of talent based on the Time Form US speed figure that he got, but he's going to have to find himself in a situation that doesn't feature quite as much pace as he encountered in this Bayshore last Saturday. Well, those are all the horses to watch for this week. If you want to follow any of these runners moving forward, you can add them to your horse watch in your DRF.com account. Then you'll get email notifications when these horses are entered back in the future. You can also go into your DRF formulator or Time Form US past performances and make notes in the charts of both of those past performance sets. Just put your notes in, and those notes that you write about these horses' trips will appear in the running lines when they're entered back in the past performances for future races. So that's all the horses to watch for this week, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure to catch another episode of Horses to Watch coming up next week.